So, Robert Easter Jr. managed to successfully defend his lightweight belt against one Javier Fortuna in a split decision victory, and a victory that's come to be something of a trend for Robert Easter Jr. Three of his last four fights, he's had very close decisions over, I don't want to necessarily say like not top tier opposition, but at the very least, from a lot of people's perspective, not top tier opposition. Not necessarily guys that would be like top three or top five at lightweight, whereas Easter is generally considered that, especially with the wins that he has just in general. He got a close victory over Richard Commey initially to win the title. He defended it once against an easy opponent. I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head. And then, of course, he fought Denis Shafikov, his mandatory, a very good fighter, a very well-proven fighter in Shafikov. And a fight where Easter actually looked pretty good in the early goings of the fight, but he started to gas out towards the end of it. And Denis Shafikov was actually giving him quite a bit of trouble towards the end of that fight. And not unlike in that fight, it almost seemed like Javier Fortuna kind of picked up where Denis Shafikov left off and given Easter all kinds of problems, just with the erratic movement, the sporadic movement, his constant changing of angles and positioning, and also the fact that Fortuna is he's a bit of a wild man. He comes from the kind of the Ricardo Mayorga school of do whatever feels good at that moment. Just I'm throwing punches at all angles. I'm throwing long bombs from outside. I'm rushing in from long range. I'm getting in. Although like sometimes he'll be a little bit subtle about it too, where he'll try to get up on the outside after hitting you with a couple of good shots. He'll skate away, toward like as an exit plan towards all the way on the outside where you can't reach him. And even though Easter does have a long reach, Shafikov would oftentimes almost kind of make that a liability for Easter, whereby he'd be able to kind of make Easter kind of reach for him, like almost like lunge towards him and reach for him with that long reach, almost like overestimating his own reach, like causing Easter to overestimate it, and then he'd punish Easter with a counter punch, or otherwise, he'd lunge in with a couple of shots, kind of bully Easter, and then he'd back off and then completely leave himself out of range where Easter wouldn't be able to necessarily punish him for almost like backing straight up, or going back in straight lines in a way where that's definitely a defensive liability for a lot of fighters. But Easter didn't necessarily have the timing or the hand speed in order to be able to make him pay for that. And he was also kind of being, just like I had alluded to earlier, being thrown off by Fortuna's rhythm. Of course, Fortuna did get deducted a point in the second round, which is a part of the reason why he wound up losing the fight. In the end, he got deducted a point for hitting behind the head, in what was a rabbit punch. I made a couple of videos about that, talking about rabbit punching in general. A lot of the shots at first, at least in the first round, weren't really rabbit punches. They weren't really back of the head type blows. They were getting close, and there were moments where Easter was kind of completely turned around, and Fortuna was just basically hitting him on the head or whatever. But Fortuna, like I said before, he's a fighter that he kind of just lets his fist fly, and wherever they land is kind of your problem. That's your concern, and that's the ref's concern in order to stop him from just hitting you wherever the hell he feels like it. That Fortuna's game plan is just to be brutal, to make it a street fight, to make it just wild. Like I said, he's a wild man. He's got a wild style. He's going in there and looking to just make a fight out of it, not really have it be a boxing match as much as have it be a fight. He'll turn it into a boxing match at times, and that in that case, like, he kind of throws his opponents off as well, because like they'll think like, okay, well, now I'm boxing this guy, and all of a sudden he bum rushes them and just is hitting them with all these kind of crazy shots everywhere on their body and their head and everything. And now it's like, oh shit, like I'm in a fight now, like I'm not boxing now, I'm in a fight. It's almost like two different modes. He'll kind of switch on and switch off as he pleases. Easter did start to come on a bit better in the mid rounds and the late rounds, try to get his kind of inside fighting together. But ultimately, like, Easter's inside fighting ability isn't that good. It's almost like Easter, he kind of reminds me of like he looks to me like a fighter that, because of the fact that he came up under kind of the tutelage and like kind of looking up to Adrian Broner and Rashid Warren especially. A lot of people don't realize that all those guys, including Broner, looked up to Rashid Warren, as Warren was representing the U.S. in the Olympics on 3 separate occasions. even though he turned pro after Broner did, of course, because of the fact that he represented the U.S. 3 times. But they all looked up to him, and then he also looked up to he also looked up to Broner. But Broner and Rashid Warren are both, even for their weight classes, like even though Rashid Warren fights at super flyweight now, he fought at bantamweight. He's a relatively short guy, even at his own weight class. And Broner, once again, he's a short guy. He's definitely a short guy for, a lightweight, for a light welterweight, what have you. Easter, on the other hand, is a very tall fighter for a lightweight. He's really taller than most of the top guys at welterweight even. So for him to be fighting in a style that's very similar to the likes of Warren and Broner, it just doesn't suit him. It really doesn't. And there's certain subtleties that both Warren and Broner have done in the past in some of their fights that Easter hasn't necessarily shown completely. He showed it in spots against Shavkov, I think, because Shavkov pushed him to that limit, whereby he kind of had to be a little bit more defensively responsible in terms of like the counter catch and hit type of routine that he would do. But here against Fortuna was largely just lacking. It's almost like he was just trying to stand and deliver and knock Fortuna out, basically. I don't know if he may have had a bad weight cut. I don't know if maybe his eyes weren't really on the ball, because, Easter, I think, in a sense, he's kind of starting to believe his own hype. He's been gassed up a little bit, I think. And, Fortuna is a guy that only had one loss, and even though it was a knockout loss to Jason Sosa, he was winning the fight. He was beating Sosa's ass up until Sosa kind of landed a Hail Mary towards the end of the fight. And Fortuna is a fighter that you can land a Hail Mary against, because like I said, he's so crazy. He's moving in all these weird different directions. Like, he'll drop his hands just at a moment's notice, and that's pretty much how Sosa was able to catch him. He was able to catch him late in a fight that was a long drawn out kind of war, a very energy intensive fight, and he caught Fortuna at a good time. Other than that, Fortuna's had a couple of occasions where he didn't necessarily look great, sure, but that was his only loss. So there's I think a lot of people, and Easter included in that, and I think Easter most especially included in that, because he's the fighter that shouldn't necessarily be overlooking an opponent. I think he may have overlooked Fortuna to a certain degree. But who knows? Like I said, it may have also been a bad weight cut. For Easter's the type of guy, just if you look at his height and his frame and everything, as well as if you look, just in his more recent fights, and compare, how he looked at the weigh-in and how he looked in the fight in his recent fights compared to how he looked with Fortuna. He looks like a guy that really, his body is starving for him to be like, man, please eat me, feed me, we need to move up. We need to, be healthy, in order to be healthy and be at optimal efficiency in the ring. We need to have those extra calories on board, those extra pounds on board, that extra little bit of muscle that you're probably cutting, because he looks like a guy that's cutting muscle in order to make the weight as opposed to cutting fat. He whereas Fortuna, I think, is more so a guy that would be cutting fat. He's a little bit of a fleshy fellow. I had Fortuna winning the fight. I did. I thought that the fight with Shavkov, I thought that I'm trying to think. Did I have Shavkov winning that fight off the top of my head? I either had Shavkov winning close, or I had it a draw. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know I'm pretty sure I made a video about it though. I did have Easter winning the Comey fight by a point. But that kind of sets an alarming trend. Even though Shavkov and Fortuna as southpaws, and Shavkov with his speed and Fortuna kind of with his erratic kind of movement, play to a certain degree in terms of making it a bad style matchup, I think, for Easter. I still don't like his chances necessarily against other true top elite fighters, whether it's Mikey Garcia, whether it's Jorge Linares, whether it may even be a couple of fighters from 130 moving up. I think it would be time if Easter were to move up to 140. This would be the right time to do it. 140 is a division that's reasonably wide open. There's a few names there that you could fight and not necessarily get a lot of flack for. And I think ultimately it might be the better for Easter in terms of longevity, and also in terms of the short term as well. The bigger names and probably bigger money there as well. Regardless of the fact that at some point he's going to wind up fighting tougher opposition than he'll have fought for any of the guys that he's fought at 135. But props to Fortuna for making for putting on a hell of a performance. I thought he did really well. Just making Robert Easter really look flat-footed and basic in a lot of spots in there. It wasn't really until later where Easter was trying to really more so gut it out and be more physical as opposed to like technically more skilled than Fortuna towards the later rounds of the fight, where he was able to land some cleaner shots. But at that point, it was really more so Easter like being more of a brute force kind of fighter as opposed to a tactical fighter, which is what he kind of styles himself as. And Fortuna, he kind of he brought that out of him, and in that sense, Fortuna kind of fought his fight and forced Easter into Fortuna's type of fight and into Fortuna's type of rhythm, which ultimately I think is why the fight should have been scored for Fortuna. But I'm sure Fortuna will get another shot. Hopefully he makes weight next time. It seems like he's having that Johan Guzman problem of being a very talented fighter, but he can't stop eating. And I think he could very well win a title at 135 as well. I mean, I thought the win over Brian Vasquez especially was a very, very good win. I mean, especially in light of how much trouble Vasquez has given actually Ray Beltran recently, and some of the past fights that Vasquez has had. He was a really good fighter. As for Easter, I think better things may be to come, but he definitely needs to utilize his jab a little bit better. And when he's fighting shorter opponents that are able to move around as much as Fortuna does, he really needs to not reach in so far. He needs to, if anything, just kind of like either step into his jab or just shoot it as kind of a rangefinder. Just shoot it and snap it right back, immediately, not really like sit on it. Because when he's trying to sit on it, and then when he's trying to sit on that right hand, and he's reaching for his opponent, it's just bad. He's gonna throw himself completely off balance. And being as tall as he is and as kind of skinny as he is, when he gets hit while he's doing that, he'll get knocked off balance. And even if the shot is more of like a cuffing blow or like a partially blocked shot, it's gonna knock him off balance in such a way that a lot of people are gonna wind up scoring that as like, wow, like that was a great shot from whoever his opponent happened to be. In this case, Fortuna beforehand, Shavakov, Kome. They've all kind of done it to him at different points in their fights. I think Fortuna did it a bit more glaringly though, especially because of the fact that Fortuna wasn't as thought of as much of a 50-50 opponent going into the fight as the other two guys were. But we'll see what happens from here on. So I think that's going to do it for this one, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.